Today, we're going to break down the massive fraud scandal up in Minnesota, but we're looking at it through a pretty unique lens, the eyes of former mob captain Michael Franzese. Now, this is a guy who once ran one of the biggest tax scams in U.S. history, and when he looks at this case, he sees a pattern that is, well, let's just say it's very familiar to him. Okay, let's get into this.
So when you hear that $250 million was stolen, what's your first thought? Government incompetence, right? Sloppy paperwork, wasteful spending. Well, not to Michael Franzese. To him, this wasn't a mistake at all. In that quote, it gets right to the heart of his entire analysis. He's basically saying this was a deliberate, professionally organized criminal enterprise built from the ground up for one reason and one reason only, to steal our money.
All right, let's start walking through Michael Franzese's theory step by step. Now, our goal here isn't to say he's right or he's wrong. It's just to show you how a master of the criminal playbook sees what allegedly went down in Minnesota.
And look, for Franzese, he's adamant that this goes way beyond any political debate. He frames it purely as a crime story. You know, in his mind, the very people you're supposed to trust, the ones who swear an oath to work for us, are the ones robbing you blind. For him, it's a fundamental betrayal of public trust that demands some real accountability.
So, how did this whole scheme actually work? Well, according to Franzese, the absolute genius of it was in its simplicity. Let's break down the mechanics, just as he lays them out. It's a classic three-step move. First, you create a whole network of fake businesses, nonprofits, daycares, food sites that only exist on a piece of paper. Then, you use those shell companies to just flood the government with forms, billing for services you never ever provided. In this case, it was meals for kids who are never fed. And finally, the second that government check clears, you move the money and you move it fast. You launder it through luxury cars, real estate, anything you can to make it all disappear. And this is where Franzese connects all the dots back to his own life. He sees a direct one-to-one parallel between this food program fraud and the infamous gasoline tax scams he used to run for the mob. Just look at this breakdown. The product is totally different, right? Unpaid gas taxes versus fake kids' meals, but he argues the method is identical. And here's the key insight. You don't need the actual product. You just need to control the paperwork. If you have believable forms and a system that's willing to process them, you're in business. You don't need real daycare centers, just like he didn't need real gas. And you spread that risk across a huge network of shell companies, a daisy chain as he calls it. So if one gets shut down, no problem. The operation just keeps on chugging along. It's the exact same mobster mentality, just applied to a different government program.
So, based on his own experience, Franzese points to 3 huge red flags that, to him, don't just whisper fraud, they scream organized crime. Let's take a look at what tipped him off. Okay, first off, the sheer scale of it. You don't accidentally steal $250 million. That's not a mistake. That's a business model. Second, the pattern. I mean, investigators found site after site with locked doors, no kids anywhere, recycled addresses, yet they were all billing the government for thousands of meals a day. And third, you gotta look at the timing. This whole thing exploded during the pandemic, when emergency money was just flying out the door, and the government's message was basically, pay first, ask questions later. For a professional thief, that's not just an opportunity, that's a wide-open invitation. All right, so this brings us to a really critical part of Franzese's argument. Why did the system fail to stop this? And what he sees as this massive night and day difference in consequences between his world and the world of government. So apparently, the state had been getting warnings about this fraud for years. Whistleblowers were coming forward. So why, in Franzese's view, did nothing happen? Well, his answer points directly at politics. Now, this is Franzese's direct claim, and it's a heavy one. He's alleging that because the governor had political support from the community where this fraud was centered, there was a major hesitation to act. Franzese believes that officials were literally afraid of being called racist, and that this political fear just paralyzed the entire bureaucracy, letting the fraud grow and grow completely unchecked. And this right here, this brings us to what Franzese sees as the ultimate injustice, the tale of 2 completely different worlds when it comes to accountability. In his old life, if $250 million went missing, people went to prison, period. They forfeited everything, the cars, the houses, all of it. The hammer came down, and it came down hard. But in government, he argues when the same amount of money goes missing, you get a press conference, some finger-pointing, and then, believe it or not, a request for a bigger budget to fix the very problem they just oversaw. So what's the ultimate takeaway from this mobster's analysis? For Franzese, It's a pretty stark warning about a system that he sees as, well, fundamentally broken.
He actually has a name for this whole dynamic. He calls it a mafia democracy. That's his term for what happens when you put billions and billions of dollars on the table with really weak controls and almost no oversight. He says it's just human nature that the worst people, the fraudsters, the career criminals, and yeah, the crooked politicians, are going to show up to take their piece of the pie. And that leads to his final, pretty chilling prediction. Without real, serious consequences, we're talking people being indicted, going to prison, and losing every single thing they stole, these kinds of schemes are just destined to happen again and again. The names might change, the government programs might be different, but the game stays exactly the same.
So Franzese's whole analysis really leaves us with this one huge question. When a system fails this spectacularly, who is truly accountable? Is it just the criminals who took the money? Or does that accountability extend to the people in power who, as he argues, basically left the vault door wide open?